Hi, Rich. We took a good look at Tango yesterday, your walking action and the link, and also the closed promenade. And we started a little bit on the open promenade, but we'll need to look at that in a little bit more detail. Because of the contra-body action and the preparation to step outside partner, we have some additional things to look at there. But this gave us a really good chance to look at the walking action and then the characterization, as well as your frame. And part of the characterization is, of course, keeping this curve that we want in Tango. And there's such a tendency for our body, once we've wound it up, to simply come out and go flat. So the first thing is to make sure, again, that we don't have the right arm too high. And this is a typical problem with the gentlemen that I noticed this, that as they dance the tango, somehow our body seems to collapse and confuse rotation with tilting. I'm not sure why that happens, but it happens to most of the guys. Part of it could be the tendency to sit on the right hip. And we've talked about this before in your swing dances. When you sit on a hip, you automatically will fall in the opposite direction. So we have to keep control of our hips, and it's very easy in Tango to get into sort of either a Cuban motion or just a dropped side. So we've got to keep that right hip, again, underneath. So it's a little bit of the feeling as we, let's go through the position of the Tango anyway. The most basic way to find it is to put yourself square, as you would be in the foxtrot with your feet together, and turn an eighth of the turn to the left, places your feet right into the Tango position for the third position, and have a sense there of slightly sitting up and back. So I feel like a little bit that I'm sitting on the edge of the stool. Now, Anthony Hurley always talked about the triangle, and I think it's a very helpful image. Imagine you have the tails on, and the bottom of the tails will be the bottom of the triangle. And then elbow to elbow. Or I may want to think of my left elbow and the lady's right angle, or right elbow, as the triangle. And we always want to rotate that triangle. We don't want to rotate pieces and parts of that. So when we're setting up into the Tango position and beginning to walk, the entire triangle is turning. Now it's important then that on the second step, every normal step forward with the right foot is taken with a right side lead or a right shoulder lead. Again, it's not done through the shoulder. We're always rotating through the leg bones and even through the foot bones into position. So once again, if I took my normal position, I think the birds like when I talk, when it's talking back. When we would change into the Tango position, then when I have my girl with me, we still want to maintain our bodies together without getting our right side embedded against our partner, whether it's lady or man. And that's another common problem in the Tango, is that you can get into this kind of thing. So we're feeling that the rotation first through the feet in the room, just to get the third position. And then there's a rotation through the foot bones and leg bones, and then putting up my frame. So I'm not allowing the right side of my rib cage to impale on the girl. It's also tempting to do that when we turn the head a little bit more left, which, if we do that, will help us as we're walking to continue that curve in Tango. And when you look directly straight forward, you're more likely to simply square up. But anytime that we turn our head to the left, it's very easy to allow the right shoulder to follow the head. So once again, we've got this opposition here between our ear and our shoulder, even when we're in that turn. Now, one of the things I kept telling you on your Zoom lesson, and I know you didn't have a mirror there to look, is that the left side was getting low. Not only the elbow was down, but also the back, and especially by step 2. And so this side was raising up. Even when you set up, sometimes the right arm was too high, it was taking your shoulder up. Now, occasionally with a couple, like one of our present junior couples, the young lady is taller than the gentleman, and she's growing faster. And he has almost a level position of his elbows because he has to match his girl. But normally, the right arm will be just a little bit lower, the right elbow a little bit lower than the left elbow, because the line that I'm wanting to create is from my elbow to her elbow. So I'm not trying to get my right arm that high. And of course I want to feel that I'm giving her space. So I talked about the bow and arrow, and we've talked about that before. Because your left arm has that tendency to go forward and down, you constantly feel as though you're pulling a band with that left arm. But again, think of that triangle so that you don't allow the arm or the elbow to come separated from the back. So I'm turning the entire triangle. So turning the triangle and feeling the space between the left hand and the right hand. I want to continue to feed my right arm towards the lady. Now your first step, once you got into a good position here, the first step was really pretty good. I did make a point, there was another place I noticed that you had both of your feet, I think it was the link, both of your feet flat. So we don't want that in tango. We don't want to see the heels on the floor with both feet. So when you dance the link, you'll have the heel elevated to the inside edge there, the ball of the foot. So you were doing this very well, and I just want to make a point of it, is that as you were squeezing or taking the thighs forward, I was seeing that you peeled the heel off of the floor to flick it into the first step. So that was very good, and that was showing the activation in your legs and feet. The problem was then we seemed to lose that activation on the second step. And I noticed this also in your promenade step. So what helped you a lot on step 2, you seem to be okay here. But on the second step, and a lot of the men have this problem, if you think of going through those different segments, strike with the heel, move to the whole foot, pronate through the big toe, and as you do that, your shin will move towards the floor and your thigh will move forward. Once you start to pronate, or work the kneecap through the big toe into the curve and feed the shin forward, the activation of the leg muscles is automatic. We'll have a co-contraction around these muscles. So you're not getting a loose, heavy overbending of the knees. So that's a problem in tango where people can actually be too low. They're low beyond the point of having dynamics. I like to talk about tango having a normal and a below normal. I don't know what the birds are saying, but they're busy. So even though we often say that, well, there's no change in level in the tango, it's not completely true. When we squeeze the legs to move, and when we open the legs, we're a bit lower than the point where we would have our legs together. I know with my partner that if my knees split hers, that we're too low. If my knees are hurting, I'm too low. If my knees are simply bent, they have no direction, I'm too low. Now you don't do anything like that, but I've seen many dancers do that, and I've felt many ladies do that too, just sit down into the legs. We need to sit up, and we need to activate the legs into the movement. So that idea of walking through the foot, as I go from the heel to the flat, then I don't simply land, and that's where I saw you jostling a little bit. So I'm going to monitor my weight, and as the weight goes into the foot, to go out of the foot, I need to pull myself to the foot. Some people talk about pulling the floor towards you. It's the sensation of the thigh moving forward to move the weight forward through the foot, through the big toe to take the next step. So the angle in my joints is increasing, that's true, especially if you look at the ankle. When I talk about the shin looking towards the floor, it's because my weight is moving through and the thigh is moving forward and the shin is looking at the floor. So there's an extreme angle at my ankle, but a relatively small angle here. So I'm not sitting back behind my leg. So now my quadricep is really taking over. I've got very little engagement around the leg muscles. So watch the difference. I'll exaggerate that a little bit. I'm going to just let my weight land and sink into the knee. Now I have no direction through my foot. I have no intention in my movement. So it's heel, flat, as you can see my body progressing over the foot. Now I'm not attempting to lower. I'm allowing my movement forward to create a stronger angle in my ankle and to take the next step. Now stepping into the link, this is another normal forward walk on the left foot. All your normal forward walks on the left foot, whether man or lady, will be taken in CBMP. So that's another common fault, and it starts if we lose our curve here and don't move the weight through. Now you end up doing the link out here. I've heard some people like to debate back and forth about the first step of the link. It is taken in CBMP, and some people will criticize when they see the increase of CBM, because that's not actually part of the technique. But if you've lost it, you've got to do something. So whatever works for you, as long as you don't do something really crazy, we hope that we've maintained our angle here so that when I step into the link, I can move into CBMP without adding any more to it. That being said, anytime the body is in this wound position, my spiral musculature is being challenged. It's being pulled out like an elastic band. Well, what does that mean? Whenever we twist something, we're creating more length through the rotation, through the twist. So you have to lengthen the spiral line. You have to feel that the musculature is more extended across that seat belt. That does take some degree of effort to lengthen. So I've got that pull right from the top of my right thigh out through my left shoulder blade and through my elbow. I've got that tone in there. And then taking the next step. Now that's a little bit different because it's shoulder leading position, so I don't have that same twist. But I still have to fight the desire to go flat. And now I'm going to have to increase the length in the spiral line. So I don't have to add CBM, but I have to add, let's say, a resistance against the elastic band stepping into the link. So we didn't get into the link in great detail as far as the actions of the foot, so I won't talk too much about that today, but I will just make that reminder that you must release the heel as you transfer the weight to the right foot. We did talk about a number of things that helped you on the link so that you would not sit or drop. Because when I walk, I need to keep my standing leg, my standing hip, underneath me and not sitting out to the side, I will have the sensation as though my left side is higher. That's definitely how it feels. Or that my right side is going down to the floor. So when you're here, you tend to feel straight because it's natural to sit. I'm always going to have the feeling in Tango that my left side feels more braced, it feels more lifted. That is not completely unique to Tango. We talked about that on your forward lock and also your backward lock and quick step. There's always a tendency for the gentleman to drop his left side. And so we know for the ladies, they tend to do the same thing. They tend to sag on their left side. So we've got to be careful about that, and a lot of that has to do with the position of the hip being under and the opposite side needing a little bit more bracing. So we talked about your right hip being underneath you, not sitting out. Your left heel being released from the floor, and the sensation of your head weight being more towards the big toe of the right foot. Or you could find your right collarbone and feel your ears pulling over the collarbone. Because here again, we do that link tend to drop, and then it gets even more severe as you go into the second step. So I think what we did talk about is making sure even on the second step, the second forward walk, that you're aware of your head weight and you're aware of the length and upward intention through your spine. Your head, and all the men do this, your head can fall to the left. Again, I don't know whether the head came first or the hip. It doesn't matter. When our hip is down, we're going to feel, again, this very upright verticality through the spine and through the head. So as you step into the link, you've got to make sure you're not tilted and you dance your link. You may have a sense, again, of pulling against your own body to keep the head weight lifted. Let's talk for a moment before we go into the promenade about the direction and the alignment in tango. Because in our grouping, what we used to do in bronze is we would dance 2 walks in a link, diagonal wall, and dance a closed promenade, diagonal wall, and moving into line of dance. Now we're doing 2 walks in a link to take an open promenade, diagonal center. That means our link has to be in a different position or different alignment. So generally speaking, wherever I am, wherever my feet are or my alignment, I'm going to move 1/8 of a turn to the left of where that is. So here's my line of dance, and here's my wall, line of dance, diagonal wall. So if I go diagonal wall, finish my link, diagonal wall. Now you notice what I've done is I've rotated my body to the right in order to open the girl, but I have not rotated my feet. This is a big challenge for the gentleman. Now, of course, the lady actually has a rotation through her feet. So we need to lead that, but we need to be stable ourselves. The moment we turn our body to the right, we want to open our leg. So you're going to have a feeling of working against that. How do I work against that? I keep my foot properly braced in the proper direction, and I'm allowing rotation through my standing leg, thigh bone, the shin. All of this is quite active. My right hip needs to be underneath me, but it needs to be back enough that there's some space for the lady. Now, depending how I'm feeling my link, if I'm feeling the rotation to the right, transfer of weight, I can sense my right hip moving back. When I put the girl there, I don't have as much of that sense. Because my foot, although it's going to land side and slightly back, it's coming from back to front. So in that case, I may actually feel as though my right hip is driving forward. So this is dangerous territory to mention, but I know that feeling from dancing as man. There's a sense of both of those ideas. Both the right hip seems to come forward and the right hip needs to go back. So let me do a bad one to help you with that. So this is a common fault of many of the men, is to throw the right hip forward. Usually he'll end up putting his foot also in the wrong position. It's the fact that my leg is coming from back to forward that gives me the sense of the right side moving forward and meeting the girl. But I fight the desire to turn to the left. Turn to the right, and then I freeze my hip where she can open against it. So finding that discipline of that position is not easy. So let's say we've accomplished all that. I'm going to look at my alignment now. Okay, if I'm starting the same place in the room, if I'm starting diagonal wall, what we did before for the closed promenade is we would remain diagonal wall throughout and dance our closed promenade then 1/8 of a turn left of that. So we're moving along the line of dance. So now I want to go diagonal center. So what I'm going to do now, starting from diagonal wall, is turn my walks to the line of dance. Now that alignment again is telling me about my feet. I'm in the tango position, so I'm not facing the same direction as my feet are facing. when I now dance the link, so here's the error. You're wanting to go back to diagonal to wall. So in line of dance, I'm going to execute my progressive link with my body and my feet more to the line of dance. And then I will move diagonal center, or an eighth of a turn to the left. So you can practice that. Put yourself here. Okay, there's an eighth of a turn, so that's where I'm going to walk. Where I'm here, that's where I'm going to walk. Where I'm here, that's where I'm going to walk. It's that little pie piece. That gives you definitely the character of the tango, rather than go diagonal wall and now walk away from the girl in order to do the figure that we have planned. But it is in your body, having done that all the way through bronze. So now is the time to understand that you have to plan your alignments, and you have to plan where you're going so that you can achieve what you want to do. Now the other thing that brings us to, let's say again, I'm on line of dance now, and I'm going to move DC. One of the unique things in the tango also is step one of the promenade, this is for man and for lady, is not a forward step. It's described as a side step. Now it is a side step taken on the heel, so you're going to feel a little bit more of the inside edge of the heel. And you're executing that pretty well, especially now that we talked about the direction, knowing that it is sideways. And then it's forward and across in promenade position CBMP. So what I noticed there is the same problem was happening as on the walking action going forward, where you were not having that sort of stealthy approach through the paw, the cat-like feeling of the heel to the flat to the leg working. Okay, our birds are chiming in again. So the same thing was happening with step two of the promenade. Some of that, I think, was again because of losing the position, also not having that sense of, let's say, heel flat or creeping along. And the other thing was probably that the hip was overturning. The hip is going to turn a little bit here. You notice I'm letting the hinge work here, and that's that idea again of the knee attempting to dance to the outside before it flicks back to the inside. But I'm keeping that feeling here of my thighs working close to each other and this activation through the back leg. We can see here, again, I'm conscious of where my head weight is, because at this point your head weight and left side, and this is pretty typical, was falling. What else we talked about? If you're doing closed promenade, we'll talk about open promenade next week. There is, between step 2 and 3, a leftward correction through the frame and through the lead, and then a close. This is again where I feel a slight, let's say, elevation or a slight return to normal in order to close my feet so that I don't trap the girl's leg in there by being too low. Once we open our legs, because we always squeeze, now we have to come slightly up on the finish. And the lady will feel that as well. As far as what she does, she is supposed to be completely closed on step 3. So that's a different feeling than you would have in a dance where you have foot swivel. So as she takes her third step from 2 to 3, she has to feel that she's completely closed and then closes her foot. So what is the common fault for the men is to wait and try to close her here. In actuality, that would lead her to do a lock. But normally we haven't set that up. We don't have any room for the feet. So you must turn her by correcting yourself between step 2 and 3 and then closing the feet. Well, we got into a lot of detail just on walking and linking and closed promenade. So one more thing I know that we did talk about is that your side steps that are not promenade. So that's a unique side step in promenade. It's taken on the heel. It's a normal step. But when you take a side step as you do on step 3, that's taken on the inside edge of the foot to the whole foot. That doesn't mean that you really exaggerate doing that, but it means, again, you don't allow the weight to fall to the foot. Now, we're not dancing a swing dance where we will have sway to manage our closing action. We have completely different characterization going on. So the use of the ankles not only in this way, but in this way also. Do that in every dance, but it's very unique in tango because we're using the edges of the feet and the edges of the ball instead of what we describe as toe. So see if I can fit this in here again. So that's a heel or a heel flat, and I want you to feel again those joints working through the ankle. And then there's the heel, and then there's the flat, and then there's the joints working as the weight goes through. And then there's the correction. So I'm striking there slightly on the inside of my foot, which immediately rolls to the whole foot. So I will have a sensation as I take step 3 that I still have some pressure or some glue on the ball of my right foot so that I'm not flying. Simply going to now close my feet, transfer my weight, release the heel, and begin to walk. So I made a note there also that when you close and you start the next action, right? So I'm walking basically sideways. There's my girl. I'm going to close, or I'll keep this small so you can see the feet. When I close my feet, I hope that I've stayed in the character of the tango, and that I haven't gone into this flat position with my feet in a foxtrot position. And now I will renew through my right thigh. I will renew that sense of CBM that puts me again into the character of the tango on step number 1. So I think it's really important that tango is so different than any of the other dances. Completely different character, and then this curving action makes all the difference in the world in this sort of crab walk when we move sideways. So when you look at your swing dances, let's say for instance an impetus turn, when you dance an impetus turn in foxtrot or waltz, you're coming out in promenade with a diagonally forward step with a shoulder lead. And when you're coming out in tango, you're walking sideways. So that is a very, very different feeling. Now there are places where we end up more sideways in a promenade, like an outside change that's ending in promenade. We would have that in the waltz. Or we look at some of the ladies' parts on hover telemarks, or when we do an open telemark, the position of the man's foot on step 3 will depend on how much turn we're making and what we're going to do next. But it's a landing step. It's not a moving step like it is in tango. So a lot of differences, and I think the more that you see that clearly, the more you can characterize your tango. And hopefully we're going to get more activity and more activation of the lower leg, the shins, the feet, and the ankles, which you'll be surprised not only how much more character you'll get out of your tango, but the control and the wobbling will go away. You will at first have a feeling that you're not moving as much. I think you felt that right away when you moved properly into promenade. You didn't feel like you were moving as much because you were not charging your weight through your feet. But that's a good thing. Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot of deep technique on these basics. And then next week we're going to look a little bit more at your reverse turn, your open reverse turn. Alrighty, so have a good weekend, Rich.